Hi, Kate. So you are starting with Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban's asking the EU for a fact-finding mission over disruptions to Budapest's delivery of Russian crude oil, and that's via a pipeline that flows through Ukraine.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts here, Sharon. Orban has described this as a Ukrainian oil blockade, which he says is aimed at driving up energy prices ahead of Hungary's parliamentary elections in April. It is one of the reasons that he cited earlier this week for blocking new EU aid to Ukraine, as well as blocking new sanctions on Russia. Now, the Druzhba pipeline has been out of service since the end of January. Ukraine says that's because of damage by Russian drones. Hungary, Slovakia and Russia itself accuse Kyiv of stalling the repairs for political reasons. On Thursday, Hungary's government said it would reinforce security at critical energy infrastructure sites and again accused Ukraine's leadership of deliberately threatening Hungary's energy security.
The Druzhba oil pipeline is fully capable, both physically and technically, of resuming deliveries. Even today, the Ukrainians are blackmailing Hungary.
Hungary's foreign minister speaking there. Now, although the European Union has officially been reducing its reliance on Russian oil and gas since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Hungary and Slovakia were among the countries that were granted exemptions to those new rules. They have continued to buy Russian energy. Luke Shrego has the details.
A feat of Soviet engineering, the Druzhba, meaning friendship pipeline, stretches 4,000 kilometers from western Siberia and until the 2022 invasion of Ukraine delivered Russian oil to Europe. From a peak of 1 million barrels a day, levels dropped to 200,000, heading for both Hungary and Slovakia, which retained Brussels' permission but were supposed to wean themselves off it.
The exemption was intended to give these landlocked countries time to diversify. Instead, Hungary has moved in the opposite direction. Slovakia made marginal progress.
From 61% 5 years ago, Hungarian reliance on Russian crude rose to 92% by last year, and Slovakian dependence fell just 10%, even while the rest of Europe overwhelmingly turned away from Russian energy. By the final quarter last year, the European Union was importing just 1% of its oil from Russia. But Budapest and Bratislava maintained that looking elsewhere would be too expensive, endangering their energy security. Not so according to one European think tank. While Hungary's insisted offers to switch to the Adria pipeline running through Croatia with non-Russian oil would be neither cheap nor sufficient, researchers found not just the opposite, but that any profit gleaned from cheap Russian oil was going straight into the pockets of the Hungarian refineries that also run infrastructure in Slovakia.
By processing predominantly discounted Russian crude while selling refined products at prices aligned with regional market levels, MOL's operating income rose 30% above pre-invasion levels.
For now, the EU remains at an impasse, hamstrung in its attempts not just to aid Ukraine but to shut off the taps to Russian crude altogether by two of its own member states, which one estimate said had paid Moscow some €5.5 billion for its oil since its full-scale invasion 4 years ago.
Let's check in on the day's trading action now. Slight gains for the major European indices. The CAC 40 in Paris was boosted by the French energy giant Engie, which saw its shares rising 7% after it said it was buying UK Power Networks, a major electricity provider around London. Wall Street has closed in the red. The tech-heavy Nasdaq down about 1.2% at the closing bell, weighed down by shares of Nvidia, which lost 5%. This despite the chipmaker posting strong quarterly earnings and revenue that did little to reassure investors who are concerned about the future of spending on artificial intelligence. German lawmakers are considering rolling back a more than 100-year-old policy that caps the working day at 8 hours. Unions have promised to mobilize against the proposals, as our correspondents report from Berlin.
In this busy Berlin restaurant, open 7 days a week, staff work across 3 8-hour shifts. That could soon change. The government wants to allow employers to extend the workday beyond 8 hours, and these waiters say they wouldn't necessarily object.
We have to adapt to trends and become more flexible.
I think it's doable, at least in the restaurant sector.
The 8-hour day has been enshrined in German labour law since 1918. But many in the industry believe it's no longer suited to today's world.
It's a relic of a bygone era and doesn't reflect the work-life balance of today's employees. I think it's a great proposal.
The German economy needs help. Labour laws and working time regulations are far too rigid here. So rigid, in fact, that working and investing in Germany is no longer truly attractive.
Backed by the Conservative Party, the proposal would apply to both the private and public sectors. But on the streets, it's fueling anger among many workers.
For employees, this would be a radical change. Not only would sick leave increase, but the burden on families and workers, no matter the sector, would be much heavier.
Unions, which have staged a series of wage strikes in recent weeks, are now preparing for a prolonged fight.
There'll be strikes throughout the year, and we'll use every social conflict to defend the 8-hour workday. Unfortunately, attacks on the welfare state are becoming more frequent in Germany.
More than a century after its introduction, the 8-hour workday remains sacred to many Germans. 72% oppose scrapping it.
In this week's People and Profit, which is about changing trends in the workplace. It's available on the France 24 website now or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Kate, thanks so much for that. Kate Moody there from our business desk.